welcome to the first episode of Inspirational Instructors. Today we are here with Dr. Michael Celestin, and he is an instructor at University of South Florida. He has a unique teaching style and students just love him and adore him. His classes are themed classes from Back to the Future to Star Wars. He knows how to inspire students about engineering degree, and he always gets the best evaluation scores. Actually, his rating is 5 out of 5 in ratemyprofessor.com. And before we start, I actually want to read some of those comments. Dr. Celestin is a great professor. He really does care about his students and wants people do well. He made thermodynamics very understandable, and if you needed extra help, he was available. Great funny guy. His lectures were clear and concise. Fantastic professor. Everyone loves him. What can I say about Dr. Celestin? The most humanitarian person you can ever meet. He cares about his students and very humble. The best of the best. Dr. Celestin is without a doubt one of the best professors at USF. He genuinely cares about every single student. He understands that lectures can be boring and works to avoid the boring lecture syndrome. Would definitely take him over any other engineering professor. And welcome, Dr. Celestin. Thanks for being with us here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to sit down and talk to you about education.
And I want to ask first, what inspired you to become an instructor?
Okay. Well, I've always had a love for helping communicate with people. I've always loved talking to people. I wanted to bring some extra excitement to my teaching style. And those things, coupled with my love of some of the fundamentals, really pushed me to be an instructor. In addition, I feel as though I'm almost allergic to free time, so my regular full-time 40-hour-a-week job was just not enough to fill my day. I needed the challenge of interacting with young people and having that impact early on in their academic career.
So, what is unique about your teaching style?
Yeah, so the classes that I teach, I try to do different things that students maybe have never seen before. A lot of students are surprised when they get their first test that's still on fire or happens to have gotten drenched, and that becomes part of a story. But I think that, in addition to having in-class demos, finding ways to connect the concepts to real-life events help make the class more impactful and more enjoyable for the students. At the end of the day, students are bombarded with classes that have seemingly no bearings to real life. And so what we want to do is try to connect real life experiences, things that students, even with their limited physical experiences, have had thus far, to tie into the actual classwork material. And I think when you do that, the class all of a sudden becomes a lot more interesting, because it's not just solving equations on a screen or in a book. Instead, it's actually understanding the world around you. Every semester I try to do a different themed class, whether it be Stranger Things, Star Wars, Star Trek, Back to the Future. I do like to challenge myself in having different themes, as it's very easy to become very monotonous or repetitive. And having a different theme forces me to get outside of my comfort zone and find a different, more efficient way to convey the coursework material to the students. And it's constantly evolving. Every year we see a different cohort of students enter with different background experiences, different life experiences, and so it would stand to reason that we should dynamically adapt our teaching styles to this ever-changing student population that we're facing. But yeah, on my website I do try to have a repository of resources for students, so whether that be flashcards for studying table values or equations, I try to make those available. And I also try to add a little bit of personality to this. I found it very surprising when I was going to school that, my instructors, my professors, they had personal lives. They did things that were fun. And so trying to connect to students in that way, showing off some of my photography projects, showing off some of my hobbies like saltwater reef keeping, I think help bring some sense of humanity to the instructor-student relationship.
What do you think, why students love you so much, and what is your secret?
Well, I'd like to say that I don't think they really love me as much as they love to be entertained and they love to learn. A lot of students forget their love for learning because classes sometimes beat them down. And while I also try to have a very challenging course, I also try to reward them with some tangential knowledge, some sort of, if you would, bar trivia that you might appreciate and helps you understand the broader picture of why you're trying to learn this. So to answer the question of why students enjoy my classes rather than me, I would say the themes really help, and ultimately having a class that's both challenging and rewarding is enjoyable. I think between anybody who's done musical performances or sports competitions, they know that the training, the rigorous work that you put in behind the scenes is not always itself enjoyable, but the result of all of that training having a positive effect, or you performing well, ends up being a very, very pleasant experience. And I try to bring that same concept to the classroom. I don't like to make it more students are fighting against me. I like the dynamic of me being their personal coach, their personal trainer. And so I'm going to push them to the limit, and they are going to actually hate me during the semester. But afterwards, when they see the result of them having learned some things in the subjects that I teach, I think they end up appreciating that dynamic and appreciating what the class gave them.
Can you share with us some of the funny experiences you had in the classroom with your students or with your teaching?
Yeah, every semester brings new challenges, and especially when you're doing themes, every attempt brings both funny fails and interesting successes. A really funny experience was the recording of this year's theme, which took several days and several days to edit as well. I can definitely think of a couple experiences of some very strange things happening, everything from getting chewed up by mosquitoes that were very hungry due to the lockdown in the business building, to having to do rigging to hoist up one of my students to be able to do one of the practical effects that we did, where I did a chokehold. So little things like that tend to be really neat and fun experiences. Inside of the class, I think I like to have a really nice, lighthearted environment where we joke around. The students are able to give me some heat. I definitely feel some sass regularly from the students. I don't want to be the person in the ivory tower. I want them to see me almost as an equal, where they can communicate with me whether or not I'm being funny or entertaining or informative on a particular day. Like, for example, today, I didn't feel like I was doing that well, and I love to call myself out on that. And I think they appreciate the humanity of just being able to see when you're not always doing your best and just being able to have a little bit of a laugh at it.
Have you encountered any difficulties like cheating in the class or attention issues related to students? And if you did, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so academic dishonesty, unfortunately, or cheating is definitely an ongoing battle. The current limitations due to COVID physical and social distancing have both brought some benefits and some challenges to that. So I guess I could speak to that as the following. Inside of the classroom, now the students are spaced very comfortably, a minimum of 6 feet, 8 feet in the particular room that I'm in apart. The chance of peer-to-peer cheating, the chance of peer-to-peer cheating is dramatically reduced in those situations, just because there's so much physical distance between the students. And I try to have implementations in place to try to avoid things like students storing things in their calculator and asking them questions that fundamentally require a little bit of thought rather than just regurgitating an equation or something that you could save in a calculator. The online aspect does bring a whole new set of problems, as I do worry that there isn't enough being done to try to mitigate communication methods using online testing. And I think this is something that we really have to explore as a community, as I find that students that are struggling do feel that temptation to turn to academic dishonesty, when instead of putting all this effort into trying to find ways to get around some of the system rules, they should be reaching out to their instructors. There should be frameworks in place to try to have those students get the help that they need in the classroom if they do want to be successful, so that sort of the easiest solution is not to cheat, but is to actually learn the material. So that's kind of my perspective on this. I think I've still run a very successful semester, as always, trying to cut down on academic dishonesty. One of the reasons that I'm so strict about it is I remember going to school that it was very challenging for me, having worked full time and went to school, to balance that feeling of going into a test, having not had any time to study, and that frustration of watching a fellow student, fellow pupil, achieve a really positive test score knowing that they cheated, whereas I ended up not cheating and got a much poorer grade because I didn't have a chance to study, or there was some more complicated reason why. So I think a fair playing field is a really important thing. You can always imagine a sports game, like a football game or something, where one team had a handicap or an unfair advantage. That would really be as much fun to watch. And it's because there isn't a fair playing field. And so I really believe in that fair playing field in terms of the academic environment as well. So, of course, I always like to say that I'm not nearly as entertaining as Netflix or YouTube or Hulu. And so inside of the online domain with hybrid learning, with distance learning, you really face a very daunting challenge. I will never be as funny as a stand-up comedy show on Netflix. It's just not going to be possible while conveying the concepts of thermodynamics or manufacturing or, automation and robotics, any of the classes that I teach. So I think the way that I overcome that is to not directly compete with those platforms. For years, I have always been very much against having my lectures recorded. And one of the reasons is I've found that students very rarely will want to go back and watch some of these relatively boring recordings when faced with the choice. Do you want to catch up on the latest episodes of The Mandalorian? Or watch The Queen's Gambit? Or do we want to watch this lecture where you get to see equations derived on a board for an hour? So I think inside of that domain, you're not going to win. So having a live lecture incentivizes the students to actually pay attention during the lecture, knowing that if they don't take accurate notes, they're not going to have easy access to the information that you're conveying. And again, the other way that I just drive interest in the classroom is by regularly having live demos. I think having little experiments that can be shown, set up just in a couple minutes before some lectures, really have a huge impact on how we convey and tie in our lectures to real life. In almost every subject that pertains to a physical engineering, whether it be material science or civil engineering, or just, again, any of the plethora of disciplines, that you can have just some little demo, even if it's passing around a brick to demonstrate some kind of compressive load characteristic of a material or something. It's gonna give them that tangible feeling that I think an entirely lecture-based system lacks. The other thing I always try to do is stop the lecture and ask questions. When the audience engages you and answers questions, it ties them in and it brings them in. And that way, if they're just scrolling through their Instagram feed or checking to see what Tinder matches that they have, they get pulled out of that and they just have to kind of be in the moment. And something I try to bring.
And I want to thank Dr. Michael Celestin for being with us here today in the first episode of Inspirational Instructors. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Dr. Yuselin, for having me. It was a pleasure sitting down and talk to you, and I wish you the best of luck with this new project. I think it's a great idea. Although I must say, I am very humbled that you chose me as one of your first people to talk to. I feel as though I'm woefully underqualified for this honor. But still, I thank you so much for having the time out of your busy day to talk to me today. And again, best of luck. Please please join us for our intermission at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, you look good.
You see what I'm talking about? You look good too.
Okay. And then I need to say,
You want to end?
I can look at
You
here.
can look over here. Sound check 1, 2. We're gonna put a pause there. Do you want me to zoom up on your face when you're like asking me the question?
I looked there, I don't know.
Okay, then yes. Is there any? Okay, you better cut that end part out.